welcome to the Inside the Minds of the CXO. I'm Titus. It's a pleasure for me to host this conversation. This is a premier episode. We're exploring a topic that sits at the heart of delivering growth for today's enterprises. It really is around this concept of partnership decisions and how they make or break growth. And I'm joined by two incredible guests, Tejal, Eric. It's great to have you both with us. Maybe just to kick it off, I'd love to just kind of start with a contextual data point, a concept of procurement, but strategic sourcing and vendor management's role at the C level has increased significantly over the last even 3 to 5 years, but over the last decade, to where chief procurement officers or strategic sourcing, vendor management is playing a significant role in the development and the execution of the strategy of the enterprise now. The challenge is you can go bring partners in, but there's a place and a time where perhaps too many vendors bring some confusion. So how do you move this concept from vendor sprawl to outcome-driven partnerships, and any insights that you might have on that point?
As I left my corporate career and went into building my own supply chain practice, we come across that a lot with companies. They're building partnerships with dozens of companies, but I would say partnership is a very loosely termed word because they're not anchoring it into a strategy. What I'm seeing a lot of leaders talk about is help walk me through my 5-year strategy, and then let's go source partners that can help us grow in different phases of that strategy versus me trying to fit all of my vendors that I currently work with into that strategy. And sometimes you have to make the hard decisions on walking away from some vendors and maybe doubling down more with some vendor partners. But I think that's the beauty of building those relationships, and you have to tier them in a way that makes sense for the growth of your company. And I think that's where leaders who I come across, that's where their struggle lies, is who do we lean in with? And then who do we decide how do we tier our suppliers in a way that really helps us grow?
Maybe expand on why you think partnerships are moving from this perhaps maybe transactional view to now why they're sitting at the core of the growth strategy. And specifically, we're talking about outsourced sales and how a revenue partner really helps to accelerate revenue. But why do you think that shift is occurring in your perspective, and what do you think is facilitating that?
Some of it is the stronger link to cost pressure, right? And bottom line, managing your funding and your budgets in a way that maybe was different, or let's be honest, like the economy is also pulling companies up and down across the spectrum of their spending. Companies are starting to spend more time realizing, like, where do I want my subject matter expertise in-house? And what can I truly go outsource and partner to spend my money the most effectively, but maybe not have that cost burden internally. So it's that balance too of like what you bring in, what you continue to grow inside and what you are comfortable with growing outside is where I would say a big part of that shift is happening.
Growth can happen faster because you can go partner with people like Marketstar who have done this before. They've built an SMB sales engine. They've built a customer service engine. And they've done it for companies that look a little bit similar to the company that I'm at currently. Why not sort of purchase that learning and even people, right? And again, of course, it is a lot of costs, but in order to jumpstart your growth and hire in-house, you'd have to hire a lot of really successful, experienced people. Instead, you get to have fractions of those people who are split across different clients, right, at a partner, but they have that in-house experience on how to build this. And you can focus on the outcome and the product that you're building. I think that's really what's happening here is it's specialization, right? Firms like Reddit and Google, they're focusing on the technology, right? And they're allowing companies like Marketstar, who have decades of experience with managing people, let them do the people. And then you come together, you figure out, okay, where's the technology and the people need to marry? And that's where our roles sit, right? Of like, okay, how do we bring the right people to the table and collaborate on what does the process look like, given what we know best practices are from other similar companies, and then what our product looks like. And that's where the magic happens, I think, is when you're in collaborative rooms.
As we think about the strategic consolidation. Sometimes there can be vendor sprawl that occurs in an enterprise as you're trying to utilize partners, to Eric's point of moving fast. Sometimes moving fast, we'll say, well, we need a partner in this area, we need a partner in this area, we need a partner in this area. From your perspective, how have you thought about balancing that efficiency and innovation speed when you think about cutting down vendors or targeting the right types of vendors for the stage of growth that your company is trying to facilitate?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in the beginning, finding that talent, those partners who do have the experience that you're looking for, that have the experience in that area, is critical because that's going to jumpstart their growth. And yeah, right. Maybe over time you might have a few partners, but then I think you do reach that point where you can utilize your best partner, the partner who's most leaned in to innovating with you, collaborating with you, hitting your KPIs, but with the spirit and ethos of the company. Like, let's say you do have vendors in each region, but at some point when you're reaching this part of the journey where it will make sense to have less vendors, you lean into your best vendor and grow them geographically and run it dual. I always like to have, two vendors and grow slowly and have some extra budget so that you can run two operations as you transition. But growing your best vendor is always my best strategy for consolidation.
As we think about from our side, from a partner perspective, we always like it when a prospective customer comes to us in the early stage and wants to have conversations around this outcome-based orientation. Like, what are they trying to accomplish? What are the outcomes that we can help facilitate versus activity or just pure efficiency? And this move from service level agreements that maybe have been used in the past for partnerships into something that's more outcome based or outcome focused. I'd love to explore this topic a little bit with you around, fast response with no expertise and no value. It does more harm to a customer if it's all oriented around speed versus effectiveness. When you talk about KPIs tied to growth, whether that's net, revenue retention or forecast accuracy or customer health, as you've gone through your career, how have you used KPIs or outcomes to help facilitate alignment and a productive partnership?
Yeah, great question. I love it. I love outcome based, as you mentioned. I like outsourcing the outcome, less the process, and that just allows you to co-create the steps, like those sort of inputs, as you're looking at the outcome and figuring out, okay, what are all the things that are needed to get to this outcome? And so that's the first, I think that's the first thing that has to happen in engagement is you sit in a room together in person and you look, okay, we want, 100 new customers this quarter as part of this pilot. Like that's what success looks like. That's critical. And so then you're all speaking the same language, same script, and really figuring out, okay, now what are all the steps it takes to get there? And this is where there's both sides are going to be, part of the conversation, because you have different experiences as to what leads to those 100 customers. And then you try it. I think that's the biggest thing I would say is don't get married to, just a few KPIs to start. Like pick a few things, pick some goals that are alignment with that overall outcome and then measure it and see are those the things that really were in alignment with that outcome, or do we need to pivot again? And in the beginning, you're trusting each other that the vendor is trying to get to that outcome, so they don't need to be like managed to death with a bunch of metrics that we thought would lead towards it. There's trust that they're shooting for the same goals.
If I summarize, I'm thinking 3 points, right? It's co-creating the outcomes and the objectives, being willing to evolve those as the relationship evolves,
Yeah.
and making sure that it's moving from to a values-based outcome orientation around the objectives longer term. And when you think about that, it automatically, I think it does draw yourself to the concept of accountability and shared accountability there. It's interesting we avoid the fact that There are a lot of decision makers involved in enterprise purchasing decisions or partnering decisions. Right? I mean, I think the stat that Gartner has out there is, 4 to 7 decision makers are now involved, and in maybe a complex deal, something that's revenue facing is there could be upwards of 10 people that want to weigh in on who and why and when. And Tejal, you're kind of in a unique position. You've been helping to facilitate that decision process and those stakeholders inside an Intel purchasing environment, and now you're outside consulting companies. And when you think about supplier tiering or partner tiering, and maybe modernizing that RFP process to help those stakeholders arrive at an effective decision, what are some tips or tricks or perspectives you have on that process?
No, that's a challenge across companies, and a lot of it is because sometimes small to mid-sized companies don't have a solid understanding of where all their sprawl is occurring and why. So usually you have to start with the why, right? And understand what you're trying to accomplish and why that's aligning to where your goals are. Tips and tricks are really, you should have 2 to 4 very solid partners aligned to your overall business strategies that can help. Then you have to map out underneath that. It's really complicated when a $20 million company has over 25 vendors doing a wide variety of things, all overlapping, maybe not even all consistently being managed. So a lot of what I would say my first battle to go tackle is just mapping out what your key goals are across all your vendors, and then helping companies realize like you have overlap going on, and how can we structure this to be more meaningful to you for your business outcome, and then be more financially responsible, right? Because at the end of the day too, it really comes down to showing financial value, and what vendor sprawl typically doesn't give you financial responsibility, if not managed comprehensively.
I mean, I do think that decision-making process and how many stakeholders can be involved, I mean, it's deadly, like, if it's not managed properly. And I do think there is a common pitfall of having the finance team very involved and more senior involved, and therefore giving more weight to the financial component of the, scoring rubric. And of course, we all know in RFPs, like, people are just gonna price low. And so this is where you gotta have the CXO who is in charge of that business line, who actually can assess the vendor based on their talent for being able to perform the outcomes and the business function that you need. Because if it's just like a committee of 7 to 8 people, probably 4 out of 8 of those people are gonna be finance or accounting people, and so you just gotta be really careful because not everyone should get an equal vote. If at the end of the day, the vendor's gonna be, judged on the success of the business function, and so you really need the higher level people and the person really driving the decision to be on the business side and the function side.
That's the hardest one, I would say, is that balance, because probably our all of our ex-finance leaders and partners would watch this and be like, "Oh, there they go." But it is really challenging to do and go through an RFP process and push back on how strongly finance does feel at times that they're the decision maker. And you can't always go lowest cost, right? Like it works for some things, but you can't peanut butter that whole that whole mentality across every type of vendor decision you make. It just doesn't it's not good for the business.
People vendors, right? And that's what we're talking about here, right? Full-time people. We're talking about skills, talking about quality of experience, and that, I mean, the less you pay, the less you're gonna get, and that is a really hard concept for a lot of finance teams to get. I think when these cross-functional groups work well, everyone knows their roles and responsibilities, right? Finance is here to push on the negotiation and the terms, and the business team is here to assess what we're getting for this money and whether it's worth the higher amount.
I can just see the scoring rubric now. You have the weighting of the criteria down the one side, and then you have the weighting of the voters across the top, and the CFO is 2/10 of a weight versus the CRO at 3 times the weighting. I can just see how that plays into some maybe some office dynamics after this selection process. There is this emergence of the concept of AI and automation and digital transformation that comes into the purchasing process. As we think about that decisioning process, how much weight do you give to making a decision on a partner around the integrated competency between actual intelligence and the concept of people and artificial intelligence, and how does that weigh into selecting a more narrow set of partners?
I think the key here is collaboration, deep, deep collaboration, because the only way any of these AI models are going to work is if they get data from both sides, right? Like the product,
Hmm.
the internal team, the client here needs to have their engineering team involved to feed these AI models, and then the customer serving team needs to feed it, and then that's when you get a good result. So to me, I don't care how good the technology is on the vendor side. If that vendor is not good with like open source and reading our tables internally and being able to come up with something that works with both, then it's not worth it. Like that's not of any value to us. And I see a lot of vendors touting all their AI capabilities, but then you look at the cross-functional team, and there's also nobody representing like the eng team or the people who are going to feed those AI models. And so to me, you have to have all the ingredients. You have to have collaboration across both teams in order to really put any weight into that proficiency that the vendor may or may not have.
I mean, to me personally, AI is not a AI is not strategic. AI is a tool to help you build. And I do think it's really important, like especially with small companies, they're trying to improve their OpEx, they're trying to put some automation in place to grow and scale their companies. Um, but to Eric's point, it's a balance of you still need the people to drive your strategy and to really help your company grow. Um, and then you use the automation. It's a complementary function to driving efficiency and building your operations, right? And you really have to do a good mapping of what your like tactical operations are that you can shove into an automation tool, and then leave the strategy and the valuable, high value growth planning to the people, in my opinion. To your point, Eric, there's dozens of automation platform companies out there selling and building amazing user experiences and convincing companies to go that route at low cost. But if you don't have people feeding the engines, it's just a bunch of data being thrown at a company and they're not really even using it.
This outcome-based partnership, I think it logically flows into two parts to how do you find the right uh, partner or vendor, and then how do you sustain them? And maybe Eric, from your viewpoint, talk to me a little bit about tools or approaches you've used.
I actually did think about this at Reddit. I had, I think, about 9 different business units that were under my purview. And I thought about them all as like garden boxes. And so, when you want to start, let's say, a tomato, box, you're going to go find the best starter plants. And that to me is like what a vendor is. You can start with seeds, so you can do it in house and you can build it, and it's really slow and takes time, and you're going to have several rounds of, sort of not great results. Or you can go and get a plant that's really, well developed and put it in that garden. And that to me is what selecting a vendor is. Like there's somebody out there who knew how to grow this tomato plant, and I'm gonna go grab it, buy it, put it in this garden. But then it needs resources. And this is where I see everybody, a lot of folks in my role, just say, "Oh, well, Marketstar, like they'll handle the tomato plant," but they only control some of the resources. Let's say like the sun. But there's other resources, and that's where the collaboration comes in. And if you don't give it water, which water is produced, let's say, by the internal company, it will fail no matter what, right? And that's where I have seen relationships just kind of devolve over time, because the internal team just says, "Oh, it's outsourced, like it's done. They have their resources. They know how to do this." And they stop giving resources. When in fact, over time, you actually have to give more and more resources because that plant's getting bigger and bigger. So the amount of water you gave it initially, let's say things like sales training or product training or even compensation for the people who are working there, It works for this size plant. But as you grow, and now Marketstar is managing thousands of customers, they need higher level talent, right? They need more money to hire better people, and they need more internal folks, marketing team, the engineering team, to understand what's going on so that they can continue to provide different resources that are needed to grow this, very large plant.
I'd love to explore this concept on the front end of finding, because what I'm hearing you say, Eric, is the partner that can evolve with you is really important, and the bidirectional kind of resource allocation alignment is important in sustaining. But how do you know on the front end when you found a partner that can actually do that?
Oh man, that one's, I mean, look, more often than not, probably your suppliers participating are known entities for the most part, right? So, or you have some deeper level understanding of their capabilities. You maybe have past relationships with them through other business units. So that helps. That helps like figure out and try to understand how to position everybody. When you have net new, or you're presenting, like for example, Marketstar is participating in an RFP and you have to present them to a leadership team that's never engaged with you, and really doesn't understand why potentially the sourcing leader is saying this is the right partner. I think customer feedback is a big one. At least that was highly used when I ran strategic sourcing teams, right? Is finding customers that you had through my own network or just through industry peers. That played a huge part in trying to understand, okay, you use them, help us walk through a case study. I think we also asked, suppliers to walk us through case studies and asked enough in-depth questions that I feel gave everybody a good sense of you weren't just putting a sales pitch on for us. I think vendors maybe rolled their eyes a lot at everything we did ask from them, when they participated. But to me, that was the big one. Case studies and true customer testimonial through your network. That's really how I know I could effectively present why I really believed this was the right partner.
So that would be, I totally agree with that suggestion. I think the second one that's big for me is seeing and experiencing delivery of service. So I'm going to do everything I can to get to a floor, a place where those interactions are happening, service is being delivered for other customers. And this can be challenging because I know there's some walls up sometimes between clients, but I've always been successful doing it, so you can do it. But go really and meet the operational leaders. Do not just talk to people. You will have no idea how things are actually done. Talk to the operations leaders, just sort of see and hear the culture, get on site. Like, I think that's the best place to do that, and you'll have such a strong feeling one way or the other that this fits our culture, this fits what we're trying to. This is the plant. This is they built it, for this other company. Now I feel comfortable we can build it together for our company.
From a partner perspective, I love it when a customer asks for referrals, people that they can talk to who have worked with us. Part of that is because, one, we have a really broad network of past clients that we've worked with. And I've worked with them enough to know, and I know if we put someone in front of Eric, he's going to be appropriately transparent. And that adds to our desire to try and be transparent in the sales process of our strengths and our limitations. We've tried to always balance that. And when a client asks us, we say, hey, we're really good here, but we're not good here.
I mean, I always was very leery of any customer connection a supplier made for me who just had a glowing review and had, if I asked them questions like, but tell me a rough situation, or tell me, a challenge you had to work through. And if everything was flowery and wonderful, I would argue like that's not the right customer. That's not really what I was looking for. I was looking for, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything, because nobody can tell you every day is going to be perfect, right? So you
Yeah.
want to know how they handled the tough days, a challenging situation, maybe a forging strategy that caused them to have to pivot. Like you want to hear those stories. because that helps you figure out like their longevity for your business too.
There are times where you have to have a tough conversation from a vendor management perspective where outcomes have been identified, performance is being measured, and outcomes aren't being delivered at the rate or the quality that either partner would want to have. And Tejal, I'd love your insights around how you facilitate those types of accountability reviews and how you reorient when there's perhaps missed expectations, misperformance.
To me, like the hard conversations are much easier when you have a solid relationship. So I feel like we did a good job with one, being honest and super open with what was happening and what we were seeing. And I don't want to sugarcoat it, but I don't think our hard conversations were very contentious because I do think everyone showed up at the table saying, you know what, yeah, we failed there. We thought we were going to be able to hit those volumes in these next 30 days, and some of our individuals, our resources, maybe we're under delivering, and other ones were trying to pick up the slack, and maybe our bench didn't come in at the right time. It was all a learning experience for all of us. So I can honestly say it really starts with trust. It's very hard to me when our outsourcing relationships with partners that we didn't have trust and solid open door policy with each other. Those conversations were super contentious, and they really got cutthroat. And I'm going to move the business, etc. I think when you open with trust, we both came to the table humble with the data, and I felt very comfortable saying we messed up.
What role do you think executive sponsorship plays in partnerships and how they are successful? Do either of you have a point of view on the role that an executive sponsorship in selecting the right partner plays?
That's a good question. It's a tough one. I think it's super important, but I do feel like it's a really strong balance with an executive sponsorship who has an affinity to a supplier partner because they maybe have a past, engagement relationship with a different company or a different role, and bringing that into your role today sometimes isn't the right fit. So I feel like executive sponsorship is super important, but it also is really important to have that trust aspect with your strategic sourcing partner, your finance partner, to really map out like who your right partner is. And then that executive sponsorship, of course, can click in. I think sometimes the nuances of those personal affinities sometimes make that a little challenging. But big companies, I think it's a balance of the both. I think sometimes executive minus one tends to be the more strategic, the roll your sleeves up, let's really map out our roadmap and align and build supplier relationships that really drive against our roadmap. And maybe that's more what I saw as largely successful at big companies rather than just focusing on C-suite level sponsorships.
Well, let's shift gears to this sustaining the right partner. You got the right partner. You use some tools to and some individuals to find the right partner. Let's talk about sustaining it. Eric, I know you've got some strong points of view on this.
I think this goes back to resources. So, you've signed the RFP or you've decided you're going to move forward, start then planning out, what does the onboarding experience look like for the people in that vendor? Like it might be an existing vendor, but, I remember, Keith, when we decided to bring on an extra 50 folks, I flew out there. I made sure the IT team was like ready to go so that there wouldn't be hiccups, like I just knew that many people coming on at one time, you could have a lot of reasons why people would be like, this is just hard and like not this is not going to work because it's too much too fast. And so thinking through like, okay, what are all the resources that are needed in order to bring this many people on to our systems, because it really comes down oftentimes internally to what we need to do to get that many people into the door, and then once they're in the door, we can let Marketstar kind of do their thing. But being on site, I think again is critical, and just treat those first 90 days as just so critical. Spend try to have somebody there at all times. I think that's key. Long term, my always guidance is actually have FTEs on site in any of your vendor sites, but I understand there's always a gap. Like when you're 20 people, when I've hired Marketstar to do a 20-person sales team, like I can't put an FTE to live in Utah. And so to start, I am going to ask an FTE to go fly out there every week for 12 weeks, and then monthly, and then quarterly. And then we're going to grow the team to, let's say, 100 people. That's when it makes sense to go ahead and hire somebody to be on site and day to day just keep pumping in those resources, because that's the point where you need a lot of resources to sustain the KPIs that we're talking about. The expectations of a team of 100 people in today's conditions is a lot of revenue. It's a lot of output, and so that's the point where in order to sustain that, you have to have people on site.
Talk to me about the role that kind of vendor scorecard combined with line of business leader plays in evaluating and identifying where and how to sustain a partner when you're not able to be on site, and kind of evaluating culture fit, performance, and where and how you still put resources in play to support, but you're maybe not putting them on site.
Yeah, that's a hard one, right? Or you have budget constraints too to be able to go out there as much as you want. Strong program manager internally that really believes in the engagement relationship and really pulls together the teams to build that cohesive family unit. I think is how we handled it. When I started partnering with sales and marketing, what I loved about the culture within sales and marketing orgs was video calls was a big part of their culture. And coming from the factory engineering side, that's not part of culture. And I think that was a game changer when we went to the partnership with Marketstar in the partner space, was just having conference calls that everyone's on video from all different locations and getting to know each other and doing team builder-ish, probably cheesy activities. And look, I credit COVID for some of that, right?
Yeah,
Forcing the envelope on things like that. But I really feel like that helped everyone feel connected. Because look, I would tell you it was very hard we couldn't fly someone out to Ireland or, all over the world at any time to build that cohesion.
yeah.
So I think having a strong program team that believed in the engagement was how we tackled providing that bridge with MarketStar's
Yeah.
teams.
This has been a privilege to be with you today. There's just been some incredible insights. I think if anyone is sitting in your shoes today in their organizations, they're going to walk away with some really substantive insights, and especially on how to identify the right partner and sustain them. Tejal, give us your kind of two key bullet points. Then, and Eric, your two bullet points on what would you leave individuals to do now in your roles in helping to drive or find and facilitate outcome driven partnerships. We'll just do quick lightning round here.
Number one is build a relationship. Don't pick a vendor off of a fancy website, an amazing sales pitch. I really think I loved Eric's point of go get to know them. And also use your network to get to know a vendor. I think for me, that's key. I think that really is very telling. And the other piece is build an internal strategy and plan that you can plug vendors into, right? Like don't look for your vendors to build your business strategy for your company. I think you need to really come to the table with that and then find the right partner that's going to partner with you on that strategy. Thinking that vendors are just going to grow your company with no strategy in place, I think it's that's never successful.
And I would just remind everybody that it doesn't matter the geography, these things apply. So if you're considering a vendor in India, you've got to go to India. And if your team is working with North America, then you've got to work their shifts. You got to see the actual work that's being done when it's being done. Never lose sight of the in-person collaboration. And I will add on, India's far, Philippines are far. Sometimes it's hard, but you can think creatively with who you send. It doesn't always have to be you. You can get the marketing team, you can get the engineering team, you can get a couple levels, lower to go. And those are just as valuable. It's really about the organizations keeping the trust and the excitement and everybody seeing what we're really working with here and seeing the obstacles that are preventing us from reaching the jointly, created outcomes that we set out to achieve.
You guys have been great partners. Tejal, Eric, thank you for such a rich discussion. I know our audience will enjoy the insights and the discussion we've had as well. And thank you so much for your time.